30,000 men. A king, a national celebration, music, shouting, instruments, and a man dead beside a cart, not in battle, not in rebellion, for touching the ark of the covenant of God. His name was Uzzah. He died at a threshing floor, his hand on the gold-covered wood, in the middle of a procession meant to bring the most sacred object in Israel into the city of the king. The songs stopped, the celebration ended, and the ark that was supposed to enter Jerusalem that day was diverted to the house of a stranger on the outskirts, while the place where Uzzah fell was given a name that would remain on the map for generations: Perez Uzzah, the bursting out against Uzzah. This is the story of what happens when good intentions meet immovable boundaries, when a national assembly agrees on a plan that violates the structure already given. When reverence is replaced by improvisation, and when the cost of that improvisation is borne not by the king or the commanders who approved it, but by the man walking beside the cart when the oxen stumbled. In the hill country of Judah, in a town called Bala, or Kiriath-Jearim, the Ark of the Covenant had rested for years in the house of a man named Abinadab. This was not the tabernacle. This was not the place appointed for Israel's most sacred object. The ark, overlaid with gold, bearing the mercy seat between two cherubim containing the tablets of the law, had been separated from the center of Israel's worship since the days of the Philistines and the fall of Shiloh. Now David was king over all Israel. He had taken Jerusalem. He had consolidated the tribes under his rule. And he decided it was time to bring the ark of God into his city, to place the symbol of the divine presence at the center of his new capital. David consulted with his commanders, the leaders of thousands and hundreds, and brought the proposal before the whole assembly of Israel. The text records their agreement. It seemed right to all the people. No dissent is mentioned, no caution is raised. The ark had not been inquired of during the reign of Saul, and now the king and the assembly determined to retrieve it. David assembled 30,000 men, according to 2 Samuel, or summoned all Israel from the Shihor River in Egypt to Lebo-Hamath, according to 1 Chronicles. This was a national event, a unifying procession meant to announce that the God of Israel and the throne of David were now aligned in the same city. But the ark was brought out of the house of Abinadab on the hill. It was placed on a new cart. 2 men, Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, guided the cart. Ahio walked in front. Uzzah walked beside it. The procession moved forward with celebration. David and all Israel celebrated before the Lord with songs and with lyres, harps, tambourines, sistrums, and cymbals. The sound was festive. The movement was public, the intention was reverent, but the method was not prescribed. The law given to Israel through Moses had outlined how the ark was to be moved. In the book of Numbers, chapter 4, the instructions are explicit. When the camp was to set out, Aaron and his sons were to go into the tent and take down the veil and cover the ark of the testimony with it. They were to cover it further with skins and a cloth of blue. And then the sons of Kohath, a Levitical clan, were to come and carry it, but they were forbidden to touch the holy things. The text states plainly, they must not touch the holy things, or they will die. The ark was to be carried on poles that passed through rings on its sides, borne on the shoulders of the Kohathites. It was never to be placed on a cart. It was never to be handled by those outside the designated line. And it was never, under any circumstance, to be touched. David's procession did not follow this method. The ark rode on a new cart, drawn by oxen, guided by the sons of a householder, rather than carried by Levites under priestly supervision. The assembly had agreed. The king had approved. The celebration had begun. But the structure beneath the celebration was improvisational, not prescribed. And the weight of the holy object rested not on sanctified shoulders, but on wood and wheels, subject to the terrain and the stability of animals. When the procession reached the threshing floor of Nacon, or Chidon, depending on the account, the oxen stumbled. The cart lurched. The ark, perched on the platform, shifted as though it might fall. In that instant, Uzzah reached out his hand. He took hold of the ark to steady it. The text does not suggest defiance. It does not describe rebellion or contempt. It records a reflex, a man walking beside a sacred object, seeing it tip, and acting to prevent its fall to the ground. His hand made contact with the gold-covered wood, and the Lord's anger burned against him. The text states that God struck him down there because of his irreverent act, or because of his error, depending on translation. Uzzah died beside the ark of God. The procession stopped. The celebration ended. The songs and instruments fell silent at the threshing floor. One moment, a national assembly moved toward Jerusalem in joy. The next, a man lay dead beside the object he had tried to protect, and the king stood facing a breach he had not anticipated. David's reaction is recorded in two layers. First, he became angry. The Hebrew word used describes a kindling, a burning. David was angry that the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah. The place was named Perez Uzzah, meaning the bursting out against Uzzah, a name that the chronicler notes remained in use to the time of writing. But anger gave way quickly to fear. David became afraid of God that day. He asked aloud, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me?" The question was not rhetorical. It was institutional. If bringing the ark to Jerusalem results in death at a threshing floor, how can the king house it in his city? How can the people approach it? How can the plan proceed? David did not bring the ark into the city of David that day. He redirected it. The ark was taken aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite, a man whose name suggests foreign or border origins, a Gittite, possibly from Gath, a Philistine city, though serving within Israelite society. The ark remained in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months. During that time, the text records, the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Crops, livestock, children, health. The nature of the blessing is not detailed, but its presence is affirmed and its report eventually reaches David. While the king's project halted, and a private household on the periphery absorbed the ark and prospered under its presence. The death of Uzzah raises a question that the narrative does not resolve with comfort. Why does a reflexive act to prevent the ark from falling to the ground result in immediate death? The text provides an answer rooted not in Uzzah's intent, but in the structure of holiness itself. The regulations given in Numbers are not suggestions contingent on motive. They are boundaries. The Kohathites were told they must not touch the holy things, or they would die. The consequence is stated in advance. It is not conditioned on malice or ignorance. It is conditioned on contact. The ark is identified as the throne of the God who dwells between the cherubim, the object that bears the name. Proximity to it is governed not by good intentions, but by prescribed roles, on prescribed methods, and prescribed distances. Uzzah was not a Kohathite. He was not covered by the priestly protocols. He was not carrying the ark on his shoulder via the poles designed for that purpose. He was walking beside a cart, an arrangement that had already placed him closer to the ark than the law permitted. And when his hand made contact, the boundary that had been outlined in the law asserted itself. David later acknowledges this. When he organizes a second attempt to bring the ark to Jerusalem, recorded in 1 Chronicles chapter 15, he gives explicit instructions. He says, "No one but the Levites may carry the ark of God, because the Lord chose them to carry the ark of the Lord and to minister before him forever." He then addresses the Levites directly and adds, "It was because you, the Levites, did not bring it up the first time that the Lord our God broke out in anger against us. We did not inquire of him about how to do it in the prescribed way." The king identifies the failure not as Uzzah's alone, but as institutional. A failure to consult, a failure to align the logistics of the procession with the structure already given in the law. The cart, the sons of Abinadab, the festive assembly, all of it proceeded without reference to the method that separated life from death in the transport of the holy. The contrast is deliberate in the narrative. On the second attempt, the Levites carry the ark on their shoulders with the poles, as Moses had commanded. Sacrifices are offered. The procession succeeds. The ark enters the city of David. But the first attempt, the one that seemed right to all the people, ended at a threshing floor with a man dead and a place named for divine outburst. The difference was not enthusiasm. Both processions were celebratory. The difference was not intent. Both sought to honor God by bringing the ark into the center of Israel's life. The difference was method. One followed the prescribed structure, the other improvised. The cost of that improvisation was not borne by the king or the assembly who approved the plan. It was borne by Uzzah, the man walking beside the cart, whose proximity to the ark made him the first point of contact when instability occurred. His death was immediate. The text does not record a trial, a warning, or a reprieve. The boundary was crossed, and the consequence followed. The narrative offers no comfort to his family. It does not explain how they were compensated or what became of the house of Abinadab after their son was struck down while guiding the ark on behalf of the nation. The only mention of Uzzah after his death is in the place name, a permanent marker in Israel's landscape that a man died there, beside the ark, because the method of transport violated what had been prescribed. The broader costs radiated outward. David's project to centralize worship around the ark in Jerusalem was delayed by at least 3 months. The 30,000 men assembled for the procession witnessed not the triumphant entry of the ark into the capital, but its diversion to a private house on the outskirts. The assembly that had agreed the plan seemed right to all the people, saw that agreement produced not unity, but death and fear. The king, him who had consolidated political and military power, found that symbolic and religious consolidation required more than royal decree and popular support. It required adherence to a structure that predated his throne and operated independently of his authority. The ark's stay in the house of Obed-Edom introduces another tension. The household blessed by the ark's presence was not the royal household. It was not the priests at the tabernacle or the Levites assigned to its care. It was the house of a man on the margin, a Gittite, whose 3 months with the ark brought prosperity while the king's city went without. The blessing recorded in the text does not depend on institutional position or national prominence. It depends on proximity under conditions that do not provoke breach. Obed-Edom did not move the ark. He did not touch it. He housed it, and the Lord blessed his household. Meanwhile, David, who sought to bring the ark into his own city, stood at a distance, asking how it could ever come to him. The narrative does not resolve the tension between divine presence and human access. The ark is both the symbol of God dwelling among his people and the object that kills a man for touching it to prevent its fall. It is both the source of blessing for Obed-Edom and the source of death for Uzzah. The same object, in the same chapters, performs both functions. The difference lies entirely in the structure of approach, whether the prescribed method is followed, whether the designated carriers are used, whether the boundaries written into the law are observed. Intent does not override structure. Celebration does not suspend regulation. A new cart, however carefully built, does not replace the poles and the shoulders of the Kohathites. The second attempt's success does not erase the first attempt's failure. Uzzah remains dead. Perez Uzzah remains named. The threshing floor remains a marked site where a national procession collapsed into a single death. David's later acknowledgment that the first method was wrong does not restore the man who died under it. The correction is institutional, not personal. The Levites carry the ark properly the second time, and the ark reaches Jerusalem without further loss. But the cost of learning that the prescribed way was non-negotiable was a life, a name, and a permanent place in Israel's memory where good intentions met immovable boundaries. The text does not comfort the reader with explanations of Uzzah's inner state or assurances of his eternal destiny. It does not soften the event by framing it as a tragic accident. It records the event as a consequence, A man touched the ark, and he died, because the structure governing the ark's holiness did not yield to improvisation. The law had stated in advance what would happen. The procession proceeded without reference to that statement. And when the oxen stumbled and the cart lurched, the gap between what was prescribed and what was practiced closed in an instant at the threshing floor of Nacon. The question the narrative leaves unresolved is not whether God was justified. Scripture does not invite that inquiry. But what it means for a community to live in proximity to holiness under conditions where access is not universal and boundaries are not negotiable. The ark represented the presence of the God who led Israel out of Egypt, who gave the law at Sinai, who promised to dwell among his people. But dwelling among them did not mean they could approach without structure. The cherubim on the mercy seat faced each other over the space where, once a year, the high priest would sprinkle blood on the Day of Atonement. That space was not open, that object was not accessible, and the day a man reached out to steady it, the boundaries written into its design and the law that governed it asserted themselves without regard to his intent. David brought the ark into Jerusalem on the second attempt. He danced before it, he sacrificed before it, he installed it in a tent he had prepared, but the first attempt remained part of the story. The place named Perez Uzzah remained on the map. And the question, how can the ark of the Lord ever come to me, lingered not as a question answered, but as a question the nation had to carry forward. What does it cost to bring the holy into the center of common life? And who pays that cost when the method chosen does not align with the structure already given? The ark eventually rested in the tent David prepared and later in the temple Solomon built. But Uzzah did not see that tent or that temple. He died at a threshing floor, his hand on the ark, his name preserved in the place where the procession stopped. And the people of Israel, then and after, had to reckon with the fact that reverence, real reverence, the kind that preserves life in the presence of the holy, does not improvise,